We have the talented youngster Andy Woodward on our screen. He's taking on the GOAT, Magnus Carlsen. What a great clash this is. The Sigeman Co has given us delightful encounters. Andy Woodward with Magnus, Zuzhiner with Magnus, Arjun Erigaisi with Magnus, Yaz Khan with the youngsters. Every sort of encounter, and I think we've enjoyed it thoroughly. But Magnus is currently in hot pursuit as he is behind the leaders uh, by half a point, and he needs to kind of win his game. And there we have the guest who's making the first move on the board. Now, Andy Woodward is very talented. He's rated 2635, but facing Magnus will not be easy. That too, when Magnus is kind of in a must win situation if he wants to win the tournament. And this Magnus is the most dangerous because he'll try to create his chances. On the other hand, Andy is white. So let's see how this goes. Pawn to d4, and immediately Magnus gets up, puts his jacket on the chair, and gets back on the board. So d4, and how is Magnus going to respond here? What opening will he choose? d5 seems too simplistic perhaps. So he goes knight to f6. And he plays his pawn to c4. And now Magnus goes for g6. Wow. That just shows how important it is for Magnus to complicate the game. We've seen Magnus play the Benoni here against Nils Grandelius, and now it's time for us to see the King's Indian. Bishop g7, pawn to e4 by Andy Woodward, d6 played by Magnus, and now Bishop e2. Interesting setup chosen. I mean, you can play so many ways with white against the King's Indian. Black castles, and now the move order that he chooses is Bishop e2 and Bishop e3, delaying with the development of the knight on g1. Pawn to a5, and knight comes out to f3. Now e5 break will be something that is possible, but Magnus isn't playing it because e5 could give chance to go into the endgame, which Magnus doesn't want. He wants to complicate the game as much as possible. Bishop g5, and now pawn to h6. One way to go about here is to go with your bishop this way, but Andy Woodward chooses the other way where he goes bishop to c1. Magnus now strikes in the center with pawn to e5. We have short castles. I mean, it was interesting, by the way, to go h3, and Magnus, I'm pretty sure, would have gone for this kind of a setup with interesting chances. But castles, knight f6. And here maybe this idea of take, and putting Magnus trying to win this endgame would not be easy. But Andy is in a fighting mood. He goes bishop e3. Knight comes back to g4. Now I don't know if white would be happy with the draw here. I'm pretty sure that if knight f6, he might also change his move. Andy Woodward here is trying to test Magnus. Of course, Magnus doesn't want to draw at all. He goes knight d7. And now pawn to h3, pushing the knight away. Knight comes back to f6. And now I really feel like you should take and go for this structure. I think this is a very nice edge for white. But Andy goes bishop e3, and this is perhaps not the best. One of the reasons for that is because after Magnus takes on d4 and attacks this pawn on e4, if you have to play the move f3, then the dark squares do get a bit weakened. You can see Magnus there going after the e4 pawn, and if f3 has to be played, then with h3 having already been played, it's sometimes a bit problematic. He had to do it. f3, and you can see Magnus immediately latching onto the dark squares. Okay, queen comes up to d2, attacking the pawn on h6. Magnus goes pawn to g5, further clamping down on the dark squares. Bishop d1. I like this move a lot because he makes square for the knight to go to e2, and also the bishop can pop out to c2 and be on this diagonal. By the way, remember with g5, f5 square is weakened. Magnus goes bishop e6, attacking c4, and here there's a very interesting pawn sacrifice where you can go takes and knight f5 and then continue this way, but Andy goes b3. He doesn't go for that sacrifice, and Magnus starts creating more counterplay with the move a4. If b4, here you have to be careful for ideas like bishop c4, b takes c5, and bishop f1 when it is quite complicated. So first he goes bishop c2, Magnus takes, ab, ab, and rook takes a1. I guess you take back here, and okay, white has a very nice position in the center, but at the same time black pieces look really cool. And Magnus goes bishop e5, continuing his dark square strategy. Rook a7, getting the rook to the 7th, maybe threatening b4 and rook b7, and Magnus pushes his pawn to c6. Right now, is he going to push b4? No, he first goes knight e2, because if b4, there's this move queen b6. That's why Magnus had gone c6. So knight e2, and now knight f4 played. And if knight takes f4, pawn takes, bishop takes, queen b6 is very dangerous. So bishop f2, knight e2, knight e2 taken, and Magnus now comes queen to f6. So he's gotten his queen on this diagonal, and bishop comes up to e3. Well, you can simply drop back the bishop and defend this pawn, but Magnus goes for the piece sacrifice. He takes on h3, and he's telling Andy, if you take here, I have queen takes f3 and your king is weak, and this is actually trouble time. So b4 played by Andy, he ignores it, and the knight goes back to d7. And now is he taking on h3? No, he takes on b7. Okay, this is very interesting because Andy is saying, like, I don't care about you doing anything. Magnus comes back, and is the king weakened? I don't know. Knight d4, a huge mistake here by Andy Woodward. Should have played bishop a3, attacking here, but knight d4 now, a very powerful move. Is rook a8 coming in? And even though the h3 pawn looks immaterial, it has weakened the king. It has weakened, and Magnus finds it. Rook a8 on the board. What a move. What a move by Magnus Carlsen. And now Andy Woodward, who has 4 minutes on the clock, he goes knight takes e6. Magnus takes with the queen. And there's pressure on c4. Rook a1 is threatened. Not an easy position to play here for white for sure. And that too with little time on the clock. 9 more moves to make before you reach move 40. He goes bishop d3. He defends the c4 pawn. But I believe this is not going to help, because look at this. I go check, and after king f2, I bring my knight in, and I slowly start going on all these squares, and the king is very, very weak. You can see Magnus calculating his way through, And he goes boom, check. Rook a1, king f2. And now knight to f6. He brings his knight to a good square. Knight h5 is coming. And it's incredible that although everything seems even in this position, white is utterly lost. Rook h1, a lovely move. Trying to go to h2 with queen h3 coming in. King e2. And now knight h5. The threat is knight g3 check. And the king is almost boxed in, cornered. Even knight f4 is a big idea. The problem for Andy is that there's hardly any counterplay for him. g4, and Magnus starts to go at the king now with all his forces. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 pieces. f4 played, and I mean you can take on f4 already. He goes rook a1. He goes after the queen and says the rook here, I can putting pressure there. Queen takes. He gives up the queen. Bishop takes. And now rook takes a1. So you got a rook and a bishop for the queen. But I don't think that's enough. And now knight to g3 with the e4 pawn falling down. King d2. Magnus takes knight e4 to reach 40th move. He has a winning position. Also gets 30 extra minutes. And he's on course to victory. King c2. So in this tournament, Magnus, if you break down his 6 rounds now, he has wins over Nils Grandelius, Zhu Jinner and Andy Woodward, the 3 bottom seeds. He has draws with Arjun and Noderbek, and a loss to Jordan Van Forest. So if Magnus manages to win the last round against Yas Khan Erdogmus, he actually has a realistic chance of winning this. Although Arjun Erigaisi is half a point ahead of the field. Check. King g7. And now he takes here. The king is just too exposed. Queen d5, attacking the rook. Rook to c8. And now a very beautiful move, knight f2. If bishop f2, there is queen g2, winning material. So rook c7. The king saunters up to g6. And bishop goes to c4. Andy Woodward knows that it's all over already. He can resign here. Queen d1 check. I mean the bishops are loose. This piece is loose. And a very nice move is d5 now. Just blocking the bishop. And everything's falling. If the bishop goes away from this diagonal, there's check and you lose this material. So it's over here. Andy Woodward resigns. Magnus Carlsen scores a nice win. With this, he moves to 4 points out of 6 and keeps himself alive in this tournament to win it. So as of now, and I like how they are actually analyzing. As of now, it's Arjun who is on 4.5, Magnus on 4, and Erdogmush on 4 as well. So these 3 players have a realistic chance of winning the tournament. And Arjun, well, he faces Andy Woodward in the last round, while it's Magnus versus Erdogmush. So that makes the tournament finale. Very exciting. A good game by Magnus here, playing with the psychology of his opponent, choosing a risky opening to create his chances with black, and then moving his pieces around and really making it tough for Andy. And well, as happens often, Andy blundered and Magnus Carlsen was able to score a huge win here. And with that, that's the game. And I think it's going to be a historic one between these two, because Andy Woodward is going to achieve a lot in the years to come. And so it is very nice to see the early beginnings of this young talent.